Hello, everybody.
Good afternoon.
Welcome to our 2020 primary election virtual candidate forums. If you're on social media today, please hit the share button. Make sure all your friends have the opportunity to see the discussion today as well. I am William. I'm the editor of the Tallahassee Democrat. I will be today's moderator. I'd like to thank our partners, the League of Women Voters of Tallahassee, and it's my honor to introduce Christine Coble, who will be asking the question for the league. Periodically, you'll see both our election websites on the screen where you can find more information to help you figure out how to vote with confidence. For these forums, we're using a platform called StreamYard. Because it's 2020, anything that can go wrong will go wrong. So we ask that you bear with us through any technical difficulties as we go along. We're here today with the candidates for the Leon County Circuit Judge Group 16. Angela Dempsey is the incumbent and Kevin Alvarez is her opponent. Here's how things will work today. We're going to take turns asking questions and we'll rotate which candidate gets to answer first. We're going to ask you to keep your answers to about 90 seconds. I will keep time. I have a bell which I will ding when time is up. Sounds like that. You don't have to come to a dead stop, but please finish your sentence quickly and we will move on. In the middle, we'll also have a round where we ask you to keep your answers to just a single sentence. As an FYI to everybody, judges and potential judges are very limited about what they're allowed to talk about. If you have a question for the candidates, please type it in the comments, but be aware that there are some questions they just can't answer, which makes these forums very fun. Any questions from the candidates themselves, or we're going to jump right in?
No, sir. Thank you for putting it on. Thank you.
All right, let's do this. So the first question is the first question is not even a question. Before we start with the questions, many of our audience members aren't as familiar with judicial candidates as with other types of races. So tell us a little bit about your background and what qualifies you for judicial office. We will go alphabetical order, starting with you, Mr. Alvarez.
Well, thank you very much for the question. So I was born in Ocala, Florida. Went to high school down there, moved up to Tallahassee, where I went to Florida State University for undergrad. I got a bachelor's degree with a double major in criminology and political science. Came up here in 2006, and then I graduated law school in 2010, a little over 4 years for both degrees, and that's with my law degree. I went immediately into private practice, where in private practice I've tried over 50 trials as first chair. I've handled hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of cases, and I've done more evidentiary hearings than I can count across all over North Florida. I've been in front of almost every judge in this circuit and in the surrounding circuit, so I think that gives me a great background to be able to know what works and what doesn't work. Based on my intensive amount of courtroom experience, I know how to run one. I know how to do a good job. And more importantly, based on all my experience in handling so many cases, I know how to interact with people so that they can have confidence in the outcomes of the cases.
Thank you. Judge Dempsey, your turn.
Thank you, and thank you so much for putting this on today. So I'm Angela Dempsey. I've been your circuit judge for over 14 years. It'll be 15 years in November. I was appointed in 2005, elected in 2008, and re-elected without opposition in 2014. I've fairly and efficiently resolved thousands of cases in all divisions of the court: criminal, family, civil, probate. I've been assigned everywhere. And I've presided over hundreds of trials, including 12 murder trials. So I'm equipped to continue to serve as a circuit judge, especially in these trying times that we've had this year.
Thank you. Judge Dempsey, we're going to stay with you and please explain your judicial philosophy in plain English.
Okay. My judicial philosophy is applying the law objectively and as it's written to the facts of the case. So you focus on the law and the facts as they apply to that case. However, every case is different. You need to carefully consider the evidence that is presented, make a fair ruling based just on that evidence and nothing else. I don't make decisions based on some predetermined outcome that I would like to see, but only on the evidence and the law presented in that case.
Thank you. Mr. Alvarez, same question.
Thank you. So my judicial philosophy is similar to the extent that I believe the law that is written is what should apply in almost every case. And so an example would be is if it's illegal to spit on the sidewalk on a Wednesday and somebody spits on the sidewalk on a Thursday, well, they didn't spit on the sidewalk on a Wednesday. So it would not necessarily be a crime at that point. And so that's the most important thing to do is to look at the text of what a statute says and then apply that to the individual case, because people should be on notice of what the law is so they know what they need to comply with. And so that's the most important part of my judicial philosophy. The second part is you have to make sure that we handle each case carefully and individually. Most people are not going to be coming to court more than once or twice in their entire life, whether it be for a divorce, whether it be for a civil case, whether it be for a criminal case. We have to make sure that that interaction with the court system is something that they have, I mean, nobody enjoys going to court, but that it's a pleasant enough experience given the facts that they're having to deal with. So that's treating people with dignity and respect when they come into the courtroom, taking the time to listen to them, and not choosing expediency over individual justice in individual cases.
Thank you. We're going to turn it over to the League of Women Voters for the next question. Mr. Alvarez, it will go to you. Christine?
Do you believe there are criminal diversion programs or potential programs that would reduce the rate of incarceration that are not being used in the Second Judicial Circuit? If so, what are they and how do you see the program being implemented?
That is a fantastic question. I have to be a little careful about what I say about that because a lot of these diversionary programs are laid out in statute. And so it's up to the legislature and the executive branch state attorney's office to decide what statutorily diversion programs are in place. Because by definition, what a diversion program does is it generally takes the case out of the jurisdiction of the court and diverts it to where there's almost a contractual relationship between the parties, to where if somebody completes certain tasks, then the charges against them get dropped. You know, I think anytime both parties can sit down and talk and come up with something that's a holistic approach that can solve what I think we all want. We don't want people in this community to commit crimes. We want people, though, to have a chance to be able to succeed and to be able to recover if they're struggling with a drug addiction or with PTSD from their veteran service. Our circuit's done a really good job at having a bunch of different diversionary programs. We have drug court, we have veterans court. And so I don't want to necessarily advocate for a specific program because I think that would probably be out of bounds of what I'm allowed to say. But any time that the branches of government would come to the judiciary or come to my court and say, hey, we'd like you to help us facilitate this, I'm more than happy to do so.
Thank
Should
you.
I go ahead? Okay, thank you. So I think the Second Circuit has done a pretty good job with diversionary programs. A lot of it is discretionary by the state attorney's office and controlled by statutes, whether there's basically two different type of diversionary programs, pretrial intervention and pretrial diversion. And then we also have done a great job. Veterans really got going in the past year or two, and there's a clinic at FSU that provides lawyers for that, and they've done a really great job with that. Drug court also has done a great job in our circuit Mental health court, we haven't really had the funding for that. We have a mental health docket in each felony division, which is helpful because those cases, you just end up treating them differently, or there's just kind of a different focus. So it's helpful to have it on a different docket. And then we also have staff in court administration. There's a young lady named Kendra Brown who's amazing. And she's a case manager, and we have a couple other case managers, and they help us a lot with those cases.
Thank you. Judge Dempsey, we're going to stay with you for this question. How do you define injustice, and what do you perceive as the greatest obstacles to justice in 2020?
Okay. I guess I would define injustice by someone being treated unfairly, or someone not being treated as the law requires. Some of the major problems, and again, we're somewhat limited on what we can talk about, so I'm not going to talk about any policy issues. But some of the challenges we have in the court system to providing justice are adequate funding. Our caseloads are going up because of COVID. And so that can be a challenge, because the higher our caseloads are, the harder it is to address cases efficiently. Each of the 16 circuit judges in this circuit has 800 to 1,000 cases each. So it's a lot of cases, and you have to be able to address those in a fair way to all the parties.
Thank you. Mr. Alvarez, same question.
Thank you. So I define injustice as reaching an unfair result, especially when it's based on impermissible factors. What I think is one of the greatest threats to justice is a lack of community buy-in to the legitimacy of the judicial system. And what I mean by that is sometimes people get a perception that the judicial system is going to be unfair. In fact, I think I read in the Democrat, I think there was a poll that said over 80% thought that the criminal justice system was unfair. And so what my concern is that when people think that the deck is stacked or is unfair, then they're not going to be willing to participate in the system. So what that may result in is people not being willing to come to court to provide testimony on behalf of one side or another side. So a judge is not getting the whole picture of what's happening in an occurrence, because people think, why should I bother to participate? The outcome's predetermined anyway, and it's not going to be fair. And I think that judges have an obligation to engage in the community and be very careful about how they present themselves while they're in court, to make sure that people feel like it is not only that, so that not only the result is fair, but that there is a perception that it is fair as well. And that is just as important.
Thank you. Mr. Alvarez, we're going to stay with you on this topic a little bit. We are currently seeing a whole lot of justice delayed right now as the coronavirus causes a backlog in trials and cases. What should be done about that? Both, what you could do about that personally as a judge, and what your recommendation is to those higher up in the judicial system.
It's a great question. So I think first and foremost, it appears like the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court has laid out a lot of the ground rules for what individual circuit court judges can and cannot do during this time period. So a lot of what I would be able to do is nothing more than make recommendations to the powers that be, and to be available to do whatever they allow me to do. Some of the suggestions that I have is we used to do a veteran stand down at the fairgrounds, where we would, for veterans, would help them address issues like court costs, driver's license issues, minor warrants, etc. And down at the fairgrounds, it's a lot easier to do. It would be very easy to do social distancing at that point to handle some of the more mundane hearings. So at least we can make some progress on some of those. And I think the most important thing for our circuit judges to do is continue to be innovative and try to come up with solutions, and to be willing to be a team player, to say, look, I'll go out to the fairgrounds, I'll cover court, I'll be available to do whatever I can to make sure that justice is not delayed. And I think we really also have to rely on the lawyers and encourage the lawyers to get together and talk and work out what they can work out. If they can agree to do a hearing by video, maybe they can agree to do a hearing by video, and we can start making some progress. And we've done some of that stuff already. But I think this would be, using the fairgrounds might be an option. But again, since I'm not in there right now, I don't know what's been suggested and what hasn't been.
Thank you. Judge Dempsey, same question.
Okay, thank you for that question. So we have faced a lot of challenges with COVID-19. I'm in a civil division right now, so we're somewhat lucky in that we can do a lot by phone and Zoom. We had been doing a lot remotely anyway, so we can do pretty much everything except for foreclosures and jury trials. So we're not getting slowed down too bad in civil, and we've been willing to use Zoom. And if this keeps on, we're going to have to try to use Zoom for jury trials too. And we're also looking into some other options like summary trials and such to get to those trials. In criminal, it is more of a challenge because of the Sixth Amendment right to confrontation that defendants have. We started to have some in-person events, and then when the numbers started coming back up, we had to pull back on that. Maybe, hopefully in a couple weeks, we might be able to start forward with some minor, very limited in-person events. Will help get some of these cases resolved. There's also been a lot fewer arrests lately, which has kept the numbers somewhat in check.
Thank you. I believe our next question now will be handing it off to the League of Women Voters.
Thank you. What factors do you or would you consider in granting and setting bail amounts for defendants? And the second part of that question is, what do you believe is the primary consideration? What would you like to see with request to bail reform?
And
okay, thank you.
Same with you here.
Okay, thank you for that question. So the statutes in the case law require that for bail, that you focus on danger to the community and whether the defendant will show up in court. So you're focused mainly on those two things for most crimes. There's some crimes like life felonies, such as a first or second degree murder, where someone might not be entitled to a bond or a violation of probation. But as long as they're entitled, there's certain cases that are called felony offenders of special concern, and they're not entitled to a bond either. But assuming the person is entitled to a bond, we would be focused on those two factors. We also have to consider the defendant's ability to make a bond. And there has been a push for that in the past year or so. And so we have been more cognizant of that. And some judges have been perhaps too wed to what we had before, which was a bond schedule. We don't really have that anymore. So we just need to consider each case individually. And those are the most important things for setting bond and going forward on any reform.
Thank you. Mr. Alvarez, same question.
Thank you. So there's three factors in the Constitution to setting bond, and that's ensuring defendant's appearance in court, the safety of the community, and ensuring the integrity of the judicial system. Bond is not supposed to be punitive because somebody has, at most of the time, unless it's a violation of probation, they're presumed innocent. And so that's why one of the most important factors is ability to pay. And, you know, for the past decade, I'm not sure that was as diligently followed as it probably should have been. And what I mean by that is first appearances tended to happen first thing in the morning, 8 o'clock in the morning, or sometimes earlier. And it didn't give the lawyers, I think, time to diligently talk to their clients and be able to gather that information to present it to the first appearance judge so that a fair bond amount could be set considering the ability to pay. over the last year, they've moved that first appearance time to 11 o'clock in the morning most days, which I think has given a greater opportunity to provide a more individualized determination as to what a fair bond amount would be. And so I commend them for doing that. I'm sad it took so long, but and this goes back to, we need to make sure that we have an individualized determination on in case and not prioritize expediency over justice.
You for the next question. What do you feel is the role of God or your faith, if any, in your decision-making process as a judge?
That's a tough question. I think we all have to be concerned about letting any outside factor filter into our decision-making process. As a judge, as a judicial candidate, I'm committed to following the law, and the law is what the law is. No matter what my personal beliefs or my personal feelings are about a legal issue, I'm going to be obligated to follow the law, and that's my commitment. That's the entire reason that I'm running, is because I think judges are obligated to follow that law and to be very cautious not to deviate from it and to challenge themselves to any implicit biases that they may have that may creep into their decision-making process. I hope that answered the question, but my obligation is to follow what the law specifically says, regardless of any outside factor or influence.
Thank you. Judge Dempsey, same question.
Okay, my judicial beliefs don't have any impact on my judicial decisions or any decision making or any case. Any kind of outside influence like that is totally irrelevant. The only thing that's relevant is the facts of the case and the law, either in the Constitution, Florida statutes, or case law.
All right, thank you. League of Women Voters will take us to the next question.
What are your views on whether the court as a whole deals effectively with racial, gender, and LGBTQ biases in the judicial system?
Judge Dempsey, we're starting with you on this.
Okay, great. Thank you for that question. I think in general, the court system has done well with those issues. We, of course, don't have any control of the cases that come before us. So once we get a case, we need to make sure that everyone's treated equally and fairly. And I believe we've done, in the Second Circuit at least, that's mainly what I can speak to. We've done a great job of not letting anything like that affect our decisions. We also have an obligation, if we observe any racism, and it can be subtle, like occasionally a potential juror will make a comment that's inappropriate, or a witness. And as judges, we have an obligation to tell them they can't do that in court. And I've had to do that before. It can be a little uncomfortable, but you can't just let that slide in front of you, because it could be a slippery slope, and then other people might feel comfortable making inappropriate comments. So I treat everyone the same, regardless of their race, gender, religion, sexual orientation, etc.
Thank you. Mr. Alvarez, same question.
I don't think that the court system has dealt effectively with it. And I think some of the evidence that shows it hasn't been effectively dealt with is the question in and of itself. I mean, if over 80%, I believe it was 80% in the poll that the Democrat reported, of citizens polled didn't think that the judicial system was fair. And I think this goes to the perception of, even if the court system is in itself not considering impermissible factors in reaching decisions, they're not presenting a good perception to the community that it is fair. And I think the way to fix that is for judges to get out in the community. And, you know, we can't talk about individual cases. And I really haven't had much of an issue with that when I go out and meet with members of the community. You know, they'll ask me, well, what do you think about this issue? And when I say, you know, I can't tell you how I'd rule on an issue like this, but, you know, tell me how you feel. It's it helps bridge that gap, so that if I ever see that person in front of me, or their friends may be in front of me, and they can say, he seems like a nice guy, I think you'll get a fair shake. And I think that's really important to help combat some of these issues. The other thing is, judges need to really take the time to explain their decisions. It might be monotonous because they're dealing with the same stuff every single day, but that person in front of them may not have dealt with that issue before. So you have to be very careful to be transparent in this age where there is a perception that the criminal justice system is not fair.
Thank you. All right, I've got a couple of specific questions for the candidates on social media. Mr. Alvarez, you'll be first on this. The Black Lives Matter movement has forced corporations, universities, governmental agencies, and private businesses to reshape policies, fire employees for flagrant social media posts, and embrace crisis management, all in the pledge to be on the right side of social justice. With your well-publicized social media posts already known, why do you feel Black voters and women should forgive you and vote to elect you?
Well, I think that's a really important question. Thank you for it. So I think the primary thing that I need to make sure that I address is that 10 years ago, and admit, and I'll lean right into it, I quoted inappropriate rap lyrics, made inappropriate comments about cases, and made inappropriate comments about women in opposing counsel. I did that when I was in my early 20s, and it was completely vulgar and unacceptable. What I didn't do is make any post or any suggestion that one race or one gender was superior to another. And I think that's an important takeaway from it. Were my posts vulgar? Yes, they were. Was that appropriate? Absolutely not. And the voters will make a decision about whether they want to hold those posts from 8, 9, 10 years ago against me and think that now I'm completely unqualified to be a judge because of it. If you ask other lawyers that know me, if you ask members of the community that know me, they certainly think I'm qualified, and those don't concern them because they know me over the past 10 years. I've grown up, I've matured, I'm married now. You know, I certainly have never, and I want to make this clear, never harbored any belief that one gender or one race is superior to another. Period. End of story. What I did was make inappropriate, vulgar statements, and for that I apologize. I was younger, and I don't talk like that now.
Dempsey, you've been supported by some Black community organizers. At the same time, others have publicly posted on social media that your judicial demeanor over the years has been less favorable or empathetic to poor or underrepresented people appearing before you. Has the Black Lives Matter movement and social unrest over issues of justice caused you to examine Angela Dempsey, the person? And if so, in what ways?
Okay. I want to avoid discussing any movement, including the BLM movement. I don't think I've treated any particular group, including African Americans, any differently. Court is not always a pleasant place. There's a lot going on in court. And I think in a large part, a lot of the public and even some lawyers don't totally understand what we do. There's times where they see us in the courtroom. As I mentioned before, we have 800 to 1,000 cases. We have a lot of other work that we do, and there's a lot of moving parts when we're in the courtroom. The lawyers, the witnesses, the clerks, the parties, the bailiffs, other trouble can happen that we have to settle people down, disruptive behavior and whatnot. So I'm focused on the case before me, whether I'm in my office or in the courtroom. And I don't want to comment on any type of movement, BLM or other movement.
Thank you. We're going to stay with you, Judge Dempsey. Talk about the role of paid political consultants in your campaign.
Sure. Most candidates use paid political consultants. It's not uncommon. Both of us, for example, have paid political consultants. They help you get your message out and stay organized, help you with budgeting, and what you should spend your money on to get your message out. So my consultants in my campaign have been helpful to me. And that's why I've used them. I guess that's it.
Thank you. Mr. Alvarez, same question.
So same general thing. I use my paid political consultant, Chauncey, a friend of mine now, but basically he helps me with everything from the financial disclosures online to messaging, designing flyers and mailers, getting them to the mail house, making sure they get out. For advice, candidly, it can be advice as simple as, what to wear. What shirt to wear. Always keep a pack of mints in your pocket if you're talking to voters. That was pre-COVID. That sort of stuff. Being a sounding board before I make decisions on how to run my campaign.
We're going to switch over to the next one.
How do you define restorative justice? Would you implement this concept in criminal cases? And please explain your answer.
Okay.
So thank you for that question. So restorative justice is about, as I understand it, is about getting the defendant and the victim together to be able to try to talk out, or sometimes the family, together to try to sit and come to some understanding or some acceptance of the criminal conduct that's happened and some agreement on what the appropriate punishment is. It's supposed to be a very healing process that takes place, and I've attended a couple of seminars on it. As to implementation, as a judge, I intend to be available to all the parties for whatever they want to. If that means that they want me to sit there in the courtroom as they talk, that's perfectly fine. I'll be perfectly willing and available to do that. I won't be able, I don't believe, to mandate restorative justice, because my guess is that's going to be something, and don't hold me to it because I haven't had the issue briefed in front of me, so I don't want to give you a definitive answer on that. But I would suspect that that's going to be between the state attorney's office and the defense attorneys to decide whether they want to agree to that, because that's generally going to be something conducted outside of the actual judicial system. So if they want a safe place to conduct it, they want to use the courtroom that I have, that'd be perfectly fine by me. But I certainly can't mandate it, and I might not even be able to encourage it because that might not be appropriate for me to do as a sitting judge.
Thank you. Judge Dempsey, same question.
Okay, thank you. I think restorative justice could be appropriate in some cases if it's something that the victim wants, and the lawyers want to do and the defendant wants. I would probably not do it in my courtroom because that would take up a lot of resources. The bailiff and others would have to be there. And commonly when a victim and a defendant, particularly with violent crimes, so if it was something not non-violent, it might be a little easier. But a lot of times with a violent crime, when you have the defendant and the victim in the courtroom, it's a tense situation. You instruct the parties to talk to the court as opposed to each other because it can become heated and ugly. And then sometimes you have disruptive or violent behavior in the courtroom. So I don't want to have that, but you have to be ready for anything to happen in the courtroom, and your bailiffs and everybody else have to be ready for that because I've seen it happen before.
Thank you. We're going to go, we of course have viewers viewing on Facebook and YouTube, on our website. We also have some questions coming in. I'm going to go to a couple questions from readers. The first one comes from someone watching on Facebook. They would like to know, how will you work to reduce sentencing disparities among minority groups? And we will start with you, Judge Dempsey.
Okay. I'm not aware of any sentencing disparities among minority groups. When I sentence someone, well, first of all, 90+% of the time when I sentence someone, it's an agreement that the state and the defense have worked out. So although occasionally, we do have discretion to reject a negotiated plea, that's rare because the lawyers know the case a lot better than we do. However, at the times after trial or a violation of probation hearing, when it's my job to decide on the sentence, I look to the sentencing guidelines, the evidence presented in front of me, and the type of prior convictions are on the sentencing score sheet, but you also want to look at how much time has passed since those have happened, and other factors that the lawyers want to present.
Thank you. Mr. Alvarez, same question.
Thank you. So I think this goes to my overall issue of the perception of fairness. Judge Dempsey is right. The majority of people do take negotiated pleas when they're in court. However, based on a lot of my experience, people are unwilling to go to trial even if they have a good case, if they think that the trial that they're going to receive is unfair. And I think the primary thing judges can do is make sure they foster an environment where people think that they're going to get a fair day in court. Then they'll be a lot less likely to take a plea solely because they are scared that their trial will not be fair. And I think that's one of the primary things that we can do to try to help with these inequities. The second issue is every single judge has to challenge themselves on every single case to think about, why am I thinking about imposing this sentence? What factors are going into the decision that I'm making? And every single judge has to be on guard for any impermissible factor at all that could creep into their decision-making process.
Thank you. Another question from Facebook. Has a complaint of racial bias ever been made against you, and how was it resolved? Mr. Alvarez, we're going to start with you on this one as well. This is another question from Facebook.
Besides the comments about my Facebook post dealing with rap lyrics, there's no official complaint ever filed. Other than that, no, I've never in my practice, in my personal dealings, in my personal life, ever had that charge made against me.
Thank you. Dempsey, same question.
I'm not aware of any complaint being filed or alleged of racial bias.
All right, thank you. We're going to now change gears a little bit and go to our lightning round. So the way this works is I'm looking for short answers, just one sentence, in fact. Of course, you're a judge candidate, so you know that it is legal to have compound sentences. You don't want to do run-on sentences. Those are very illegal. We will start with you, Judge Dempsey. What U.S. Supreme Court justice, past or present, do you most admire and why? One sentence.
I really admire Sandra Day O'Connor because she's a trailblazer. She was the first female appointed to the Supreme Court, and she also has well-reasoned opinions.
Thank you. Mr. Alvarez, same question.
Candidly, I don't have a favorite Supreme Court justice. I don't really focus that much on their actual decisional law.
Okay. Mr. Alvarez, which Florida court decision in any Florida court do you think has most impacted the lives of Floridians?
Whew, that's a good one. So there's a case called Kathy Joe Cable that holds that the exclusionary rule applies to violations of knock and announce. I think that was a critical decision, especially in today's times.
Thank you. Judge Dempsey, same question.
Probably a case by the name of Graham, which had a big impact on juvenile sentencing and sentencing juveniles as adults, allowed a lot of resentencings where they got an opportunity to be released.
Thank you. Judge Dempsey, who is your closest advisor besides family?
Probably some of my colleagues. I don't know if I want to say who they are, but some of my colleagues on the court.
Okay. Mr. Alvarez.
The closest advisor besides family is probably Steve Beasley.
Because?
He's on my campaign team. He's been through this process repeatedly, and he's just a genuinely nice guy. And so we get to spend a lot of time with him.
Mr. Alvarez, how do you feel about cameras, still or video in the courtroom?
Used correctly, I think transparency is a good thing.
Judge Dempsey, same question.
Yeah, we're required to allow cameras in the courtroom. A lot of times we're able to work out where it's a pool camera, where it's just one, so it's not that disruptive, but yeah, it's fine.
Thank you. Judge Dempsey, another question. How stringently, if at all, do you wear a mask? How stringently, if at all, do you wear a mask during these coronavirus times?
I wear a mask anytime it's required. So out in public, obviously, when I'm going somewhere, and then at work, when we're in our office, we don't have to wear them, but when we're walking around, we do.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Alvarez, same question.
When required by law and when social distancing is not feasible.
All righty. Mr. Alvarez, outside of your legal career, what do you believe your biggest contribution to the community has been?
That's tough because my life has been surrounded by my legal career. I do some pro bono work that's been my focus. So I'd have to say that. I know that's still generally within my career, but it's not part of my day job.
Okay.
Okay. I've volunteered a lot with a number of different organizations, including Rotary, Leadership Tallahassee, and Second Harvest. I've also mentored a lot of young women law students.
Okay, thank you. That's it. We made it through the lightning round. We are at the home stretch. Thank you all for keeping things brisk. The next question is, tell me about a time where your thinking has evolved on a particular subject. Judge Dempsey, you'll get to start.
Okay. That's a tough one.
It is a tough one. I will start when you start answering.
I don't know. I mean, I've definitely done stuff differently over the 14 years that I've had this position. I can't really think of a particular example of evolution, though.
Okay. Mr. Alvarez, same question.
It's a good one. So when I started practicing law, I saw litigation as almost a war between the two sides. We have an adversarial system. And so my thinking at the time, especially when I was a first-year lawyer, was the other side is against us. And so I would respond a lot in kind, where we would have these huge, massive arguments that would continue in the courtroom and out of the courtroom. As my thinking evolved on the issue, I started to realize it's not. The other side is not always up to something shady just because they're doing something that I think is incorrect. That a lot of times people still have good motives, even if the execution is just not appropriate. And so that's developed my thinking over time. And now I've found myself to be a much more productive lawyer because I'm able to work well with opposing counsel, where at the very beginning of my career, I was not. And that developed over time through experience and maturity.
Thank you. Next question is going to come from the League of Women Voters.
What do you believe are the causes for the high number of juvenile offenders in our community, particularly among African American youth? And the second part would be, what actions are within the authority of the court to address the high number of juvenile offenders, and what can the court system do to reduce those numbers?
That's That's a fantastic question. I'm not sure that there is any one singular factor that causes the high number of juvenile offenders. I think what ends up being a problem is a lack of supervision. Sometimes can cause problems. Kids left to their own devices sometimes get themselves into some trouble. What can the court do? We have issues of poverty, of child abuse, of issues in the community that really need to have a spotlight on them. And what a judge can do, especially in the dependency system and to a certain extent in the delinquency process, is be kind, be friendly, take time on each case so that children in front of them feel like they're in a safe space, that they're going to be able to open up and talk about what's going on in their life. And that can let other stakeholders realize that there might be an issue that needs further investigation or further help.
Thank you. Judge, same question.
Okay, great. Thank you. I think part of the problem is some of these younger offenders don't value life. Unfortunately, I don't really know how to fix that other than programs have to step up, maybe either that are out there or new ones to provide support. Parents could provide more support in some instances, and maybe more mentoring if you see a path to a future that doesn't involve drugs or violence. That would definitely be helpful as well.
All right, thank you. We've got one last question before we get to the closing arguments, and I've asked all the questions, so I'm actually going to turn it over to you. Judge Dempsey, do you have a question for your opponent?
Yeah. How is it that you think that 9 years as a lawyer is enough experience to be a circuit judge?
Mr. Alvarez.
Thank you. And that's a good question. As you know, the Florida Constitution requires 5 years for circuit judge, 9 or 10 years for the Supreme Court. Experience is one gauge, is the number of years of practice. The other is the quality of that practice. And I have tried hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, or I've handled hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of cases. I've appeared in front of almost every single judge in this circuit and the surrounding circuits. I've clocked more courtroom time than most lawyers. And that's what a lot of the job is that has to be done on the fly, is in court stuff. And that's what I have tons and tons of experience in. So I am certainly well experienced and well qualified to serve in that role.
Thank you. All right. Alvarez, turn. Do you have a question for Judge Dempsey?
I do. Thank you. So as you're aware, the First District Court of Appeal in a juvenile case took the unprecedented step of commenting in a footnote that you were reversed 14 times in 18 months in generally the same area of law dealing with the placing of juveniles in the detention center. In fact, they had to issue writs of habeas corpus to order the release of those children. My question is, after the first, second, third, 10th, 13th time that they told you that you needed to learn that area of law, why didn't you?
Okay, thanks. So those cases don't all come out like that. Some of them came out in a group. I have made some mistakes. I'm not perfect. I'm human. I learned from those mistakes. The author of that opinion, Phil Padovano, is now a supporter of mine. So he's recognized, I believe, that I've grown as a judge and matured. And, you know, not everybody's perfect, but I've had a very good record since then. After that time, when I ran in 2008, the Democrat endorsed me, for example. They recognized me as 25 women that you need to know in that group. So I think I've grown a lot since then. And that was about 12 or 13 years ago.
Thank you. All right, y'all have made it to closing time. Judge Dempsey, you get to start us out. You have 2 minutes to speak directly to voters on why they should vote for you. Feel free to give your website, and away we go. Judge Dempsey?
Okay, thank you so much. I'm asking you all to vote for me because I have over 14 years of experience as a circuit judge in every division of the court. I've efficiently and fairly resolved thousands of cases. Supported as a leader among my colleagues and peers. I designed classes in criminal law for the other 600 circuit judges in the state, and I was recently appointed to a prestigious appointment as chair of the Florida Rules of Criminal Procedure Committee with the Florida Bar. And so we edit and apply to every criminal case in the state of Florida, and I've been recognized for those two great positions. I'm involved in the community through the organizations that I've mentioned. I'm supported by a really diverse group of the legal community. If you check out my website, which is judgeangeladempsey.com, you'll see all the folks on my committee. They're from pretty much every firm you will have heard of in town, as well as smaller firms. And I have all that support from great number of lawyers in town who have recognized my professionalism and my success on the bench for the past 14 years. There's only 3 out of the 16 judges here in the circuit that are women. I'm one of those, and I'm excited that the election this year on August 18th is on the 100th anniversary of suffrage. So it's on the exact day. So I'm excited about that. So check out my website and please vote for me on August 18th.
Thank you. Mr. Alvarez, you get the last word to take us out.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. So I'm asking for everybody's vote on August 18th. I have the experience, the temperament, the demeanor to be a good circuit court judge. And I did want to address something as my opponent said that those cases were a long time ago. She got reversed. And what reversal means is that an appellate court says that the trial judge was wrong. She was reversed in 2020. She was reversed in 2019, 2018, 2017, 2016, all the way through her entire time, over 50 times. It is critical that we have judges that diligently follow the law and take the time to get it right. I know based on my tremendous amount of experience in the court system how to do that. It starts with listening. It starts with researching. It starts with being prepared for every single case. And that is my commitment to the voters out there, is that if you come in my courtroom, if you give me the honor of being able to serve as your circuit court judge, I will be prepared. I will take the time to listen. I won't try to rush you through there because it's your day in court. And if that means we have to work late, then that's what we have to do. But we need to make sure that everybody gets fair justice in court. And that's my commitment, and I'm asking for your vote on August 18th. And thank you very much for listening to this, and thank you all very much for putting this on.
Thank you. And I got to give Judge Dempsey 30 seconds if she'd like to respond, since you brought up her record.
Yeah, thank you so much. Most judges are reversed every year, and my opponent has made these claims that I'm more reversed than other judges, and it's simply not true. I did a public records request, and my percentage of affirmances was higher than the average. Mine was 94% over the past 5 years, and the average was 92. So when you're dealing with thousands of cases a year, you're going to have a couple reversals.
Thank you. All right. I want to thank the candidates. I want to thank the League of Women Voters of Tallahassee. I want to thank the tech gods that we have had our first forum. Had 0 technical issues to my knowledge, which means I'm going to wrap things up as quick as I can. Our next forum will be at 1 p.m. tomorrow, Thursday. We had a nice cozy chat today with just 2 candidates. Tomorrow there will be 6. It will be with the candidates for the Leon County Commission at Large. FYI, you can find a replay of this and all our interviews on tallahassee.com/elections. And you can look for our special elections section, which will be printed this Sunday. It will have questions and answers with all of the candidates, including these two, that will be on your ballot. Thank you so much for following along. A great day.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. You too.